children need to experience trials. It builds resilience and trust in the Lord and growth. But if we are overparenting, then we're over-controlling and trying to take care of all those things for them. And so we need to let go a little bit.
Kristen, welcome to Focus on the Family.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a joy, really, to be sitting with you guys today.
Yeah, we're living the dream. You probably didn't know this, but my kids are in their 20s. Your kids are in their 20s.
That's right.
I love, just from the get-go, I love somebody, when our kids were really young, they said, just enjoy every phase. So I really tried to do that. I talked to a lot of parents who said, I really like those elementary school years. They were the best. But try to live all of them as the best. You think that's good advice?
Yes, and I agree.
Yeah.
They were each the best, and then I would get to the next stage, and that was better. And so even now, as I get having young adults, I'm like, oh, maybe this is the best.
Yeah, even if there's dips in there, and we're going to talk a lot about that. In fact, the first question I have for you is, would you do anything differently? This is a tough question to ask a parent, because the answer for me is yes. Would you do anything differently when you look back on your parenting over those 18, 20 years?
Absolutely. I am not the same mom that I was 26 years ago when my daughter was born. I've learned a lot along the way. So there's some things that I'm thankful that we did, but there's other things that I've learned a lot of. And I know some of that was just intentionality with being present to them. I think there were so many times that I was distracted. I was multitasking. I wasn't focused. I wasn't paying attention to those nonverbals. And so I missed things, and I didn't know what was going on all the time in their hearts.
Let me ask you this, to be fair to particularly moms who are, in that role so much. How would you have redone some of those things to be attentive when it's so busy? You had 3 kids,
That's
a
right.
girl and 2 boys. There was a lot of action going on, I'm sure. But how do you slow down in your late 20s or your 30s when the kids are young and you're going, okay, I need to take this in? That has to be very much a cognitive decision, not an emotional one.
That's right. Because you're right. You have to get dinner on the table. There's laundry. There's always things to do.
List.
And yet I think what I could have done differently is when they were trying to talk to me, when I needed to get something done, is say, this is really important what you have to say to me, and I want to hear it. Can we table this until after we eat dinner? And just let them know, I'm listening and I value what you have to say. This isn't the right time, because we do at times, we have to do what we have to do.
But it's so good to say it rather than just act it out, because I think then the kids, they interpret what you don't care about me.
That's
right.
right.
And if you say, I got some things I'm thinking about, or I'm just busy right now, give me just 5-10 minutes and I'll come back. But we just don't do that.
No, and I will say there were times that my daughter, as a later teen, told me that she felt like my agenda meant more to me than her at times, because it became an idol, just my to-do list, everything I needed to get done. And sometimes that was writing deadlines, important things, and yet she felt undervalued. So there was times that I'm like, you're right. I've made this an idol, that I'm more concerned about getting this done than paying attention to what you need.
Do-overs, man. We did much better as foster parents than we did with our bio kids. We had it in tune then. But looking at it, you mentioned in the book it's good to have a long-term view of your parenting responsibilities.
Yes.
I love that, because I think we are so short-term oriented. We want to see that change right now.
Yep.
And I believe in that. Think of the long run when that child's going to be 30. And you'll have a different relationship, an adult relationship. But so many things can be broken as a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old. If you don't handle those things well, you will not have that relationship.
That's right.
So how do we keep that long game in perspective? Because all I want them to do right now is to say please and thank you.
That's right. And the biggest question as a counselor, what I get asked all the time is really, they want formulas. Parents want formulas. Just tell me what to do so I can get it right. And I'm like, there is no perfect parent. But having a long-range plan in place does serve as a guardrail, so to speak, so that we have in mind what we're aiming for. So I talk in the book about parenting like a farmer, having patience and being steadfast, but I also like to think of it as planning like a coach. And so coaches watch the film for the upcoming games, and so they're planning for the whole season. with that in mind. No, it doesn't always go as planned, but that's their aim. And so I think as parents, we should plan like a coach. Like, what is it that we want most for our kids at the end of the 0 to 18 years? And so when we sit down with our spouse and we think about, okay, these are our kind of foundation things that we want. And so that helps guide our decisions so that we're being more proactive as we're going along instead of as we're being bombarded with all sorts of issues. We already have kind of an underlying guide as to how we're going to
Let me
make
press you on that a little bit, because we're talking about not having a formula, but if we create these things that we want to see,
Right,
it's starting to
right.
sound like a formula.
It does,
to me.
right?
So I just want to press you on that a little bit. How loosely do you need to hold those things? I mean, I'm sure on virtue and Christian behavior, we want to be pretty solid. We don't want you to lie. We don't want you to be involved physically with somebody as a teenager,
Right.
all those things that are appropriate
Right.
for the Christian. But then move into the softer areas of things. I remember my son, I'll just use an example because he did something that was kind of right on the edge. And I was like, that's really not the behavior. And he goes, Dad, I'm 16. I want to have some fun. I went, yeah, I get it. But it's that moment where it's not egregious. It's just, I wish you would behave like a 40-year-old rather than a 15-year-old.
That's right. Remembering their actual age.
But so you got to hold some of those things a little more loosely. I think they become healthier when they have ways that they can show their identity in themselves and express themselves with friends and things.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say for us, like our primary thing was we wanted our kids to know the love of Jesus and to love him. So that was our number one guiding thing. So that meant, what are we going to emphasize? What are we going to talk about? Our conversations in our homes. So it was along those lines at the, largest level.
Which are super important.
Absolutely.
I mean, those are the most important
They are the
things.
most important. But most parents say they want their kids to be happy and successful, which I do too. But
subservient to the other.
Yes.
I think that's so true. But, sometimes too, now the flip side of this with us as Christian parents, we can really dial into that to where we actually push our children away.
That's
so
true.
how do we maintain that balance to be like honey, not a stick, and draw kids toward the faith, a loving Father, a loving Jesus, who, he was expecting some behavior from you.
Yeah.
But how do we not become just the stick all the time? Which for kids, that's all. It's like like Charlie Brown replaced the wah 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 with the stick
That's
getting
right.
hit,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
And so, how do we manage that?
It feels like the difference between law and gospel. And so I wanted my kids to always know the grace. And so moving towards them, showing them God's grace and mercy, as opposed to being law-driven and making Christianity feel like it was just all rules and regulations.
Yeah.
So
we do that very well.
Oh, yeah, we do. And
It's
that's
all
where the
about the
formulas,
rules.
I feel like, so often comes
Yeah.
in. It's more law-driven, and we did not want to go that direction.
How do you find the middle ground between overparenting and underparenting? And I think I'd like to hear, what are the definitions of those? Because I'm not sure I understand them clearly.
Yes, sure, because we need to know what those are if we're going to find a middle ground. So overparenting is what we all think of as helicopter parenting. So parenting that are parents that are trying to control and take care of things for their kids. Underparenting is not a bad parent, it's just a permissive parent. So the lack of exerting parental authority, maybe setting boundaries. So again, parenting starts with the heart of the parent. So what's really in our heart that's making us go to be an overparenting parent or an underparenting parent? That is what influences our style. So in the middle would be that we are being ruled by the gospel. And so that's informing how we are parenting.
And in that regulation of those two extremes, I mean, again, how do you set the right temperature? I mean, where do you find your mode in that to know you're in a healthy spot for your kids?
Right, because our kids do need boundaries, that we know that they need some regulation. So if all of a sudden we're being ruled by comfort and peace and boundaries go out the wayside, then we know that we need to swing back and make sure that we're having some things in place. Or as we've talked about, our children need to experience trials. It builds resilience and trust in the Lord and growth. But if we are overparenting, then we're over-controlling and trying to take care of all those things for them. And so we need to let go a little bit and come back to the middle of let them experience life.
Hey, allow me to interrupt for just a moment here to say how much we appreciate you watching. Now, if you find value in this content, subscribe by clicking below. It'll be a big help to us. Let's go ahead and return to the show.
You speak to two types of parenting, one reactive, one proactive. Describe those two.
Well, so a reactive parent is responding just off the cuff to whatever comes their way. They don't have the pre-planning. A proactive parent has thought ahead of time, like, what is our aim? What are we hoping to do? And so they have more of those guidelines of this is what we want to emphasize in our family.
You know, that sounds a bit like temperament influence as well, though, because I can see Jean, my wife, biochemistry, she's pretty buttoned down. Mm-hmm. So she would think in that proactive way. Here are the 3 things I want to achieve by the end of the week. Mm-hmm. I tend not to be like that. And what I'm hearing is that you need some direction.
That's right. And I can totally see, because my husband and I are opposite in that way.
Most normal couples will be that way. You have one that's one way, one that's the other.
Sure. So it might be more natural to one, and yet we still need to, as with the Bible as our guide, think about what is it that we want for our family and for our children. And again, it doesn't always go as planned, but this is what we're hoping for.
What was the slumber party? There was that story in the book you mentioned about a slumber party that kind of fit into this proactive, reactive parenting.
Oh, yes. So,
please do tell.
Well, I'll have to give you some background. So, this occurred when one of my children was a teenager, and a mom called me and said, hey, did you hear about the co-ed slumber party that's happening after the party? And I was like, no, I hadn't. Well, it turns out my son had heard about it, and it wasn't that he was trying to hide it from me. It's just that he had already nipped it in the bud and said, I'm not doing that. I can't do that.
Wow.
And so I called the mom back, and I said, well, yes, actually, my son did know about it. He said no. And that then gave other parents permission, as if they needed permission to say no. But the whole slumber party just went away at that point, because other parents
I think that's a good thing.
Yes, it is a good thing. But sometimes parents, they're just reactive, and they don't want their kid to be left out. And so they say yes to things that aren't good things, or they don't have the courage to be the lone person that stands up against it. But I was so proud of my son, because it showed that he already had his own conviction, that he knew what was right and wrong, and he wasn't going to go there. So he didn't even bother mentioning it to me, because he had already taken care of it.
That's a great indication that you're on the right path, actually, when they start to handle those decisions.
That's right.
And celebrate that, and they may not get the next one right.
That's right.
Just be mindful of, encouragement, But that's great. I think that's a great sign that you're on your way. It is kind of funny. I use that please and thank you example. I remember when I recognized that my boys started to do that. It was like it finally went off. I mean, how many times as parents, when they're little, do we say please, now say thank you, and you do that 10,000 times through elementary school, and then one day they're at the store and they say to the clerk, thank you. And you're going, they got it. Yeah. But it is like this revelation, right?
It is.
But that's a training of the heart.
It is. And you feel like a broken record. And I think this is why some parents kind of stop teaching, like the Deuteronomy 6 passage, because they think my kid's not getting it. They're too young. I've tried. It didn't work. But they're absorbing things. And that day will come. We hope and trust in that they will.
Let me also ask you about kind of the core thing where we mentioned at the very beginning, teaching your teen a biblical theology generally, but specifically around suffering. Again, I think my attitude was get out of it as fast as you can and keep moving. But there is a theology of suffering, and it teaches our kids how to trust the Lord regardless of their circumstances, to know that God's with you.
Yes.
How do we do that as a
parent? Because none of us want to suffer. We would never invite trials to come into our lives. We hate to see our children in trials and suffering. And yet we know in this life there is going to be trials. I mean, the Bible is clear. We are going to suffer. And so we need to help our children understand that, one, it's universal. We're all going to experience it. This is a broken world. We are going to have trials. But in it, we take part in Christ. I mean, he suffered. And because he suffered, he can identify with us in our suffering. So helping them to know that you have a resource in Jesus. He draws near to you in your suffering. But it also, we know trials and suffering can grow us. in ways that, I mean, that's part of why I'm such a different person now, is because we did walk through trials and suffering with our children, and God didn't leave me the same, and I'm thankful for it.
Yeah.
But we long for heaven. And so that's the other part of the theology of suffering, is that because we have brokenness and hurts here, we long for that day when all will be made right.
The other key thing, allowing your children to suffer, brings humility, which when you think of it, that's kind of the cornerstone of the faith. You know, be humble, for I am humble.
Yeah.
And humility brings so many good attributes to your character about being able to get through things with a godly attitude.
That's right.
But man, we rob our kids of humility. Think of that. That's not good.
That is not good. And resilience. They don't know how to endure as they become young adults if we've taken care of all the trials for them.
All the boo-boos. Let me also, as we're winding down here, you talk about the practice of rhythms in the family. I think we stumbled into that. Jean was great with dinner. I mean, we always had dinner, 6:30. That was consistent. We spent, an hour laughing together. There was a lot of good. You probably had that with all your kids.
There was never
good
quiet.
Times around the dinner table.
Always something going.
But what are some other rhythms we should look for that aren't maybe as obvious? I mean, doing dinner together. I know that all the data is so strong. That's where values get kind of passed along to the kids, etc. What are some other things in rhythms?
We wanted our children to have sibling bonding time, because it's so often during the week we're dividing and conquering, and the kids are going in all different directions with their activities.
Does that sound like a pillow fight to you? Sibling bonding time. Let's have a pillow fight.
I mean, it's not always the easiest route, especially when they're young, because it would be easier for the neighbor kids to come on in and everybody just go play with their, own age person. But I wanted my kids to have carved out for them time together. And then what that looked like when our oldest started driving is we would give them money for ice cream. They would go out for ice cream. And at that time we lived in Oklahoma, and they would go drive the back country roads with the windows down and the music blaring. And it just became a really sweet time for them. Whereas then she went to college. They're all gone now, but they have their own little group text. So they have their relationship.
So they're
separate.
tight.
They are.
That's a sign of health, I think, a good thing when siblings have good communication. They love each other.
They do.
I think that's a great achievement. The parent plays a role in that, but the chemistry of the kids has to play a big role in that as well. And not everybody gets that experience, but that's a good thing. Kristen, we're right at the end. I'm thinking of the mom and the dad who are going, okay, I haven't been paying attention to this. And, wherever they're at in that parenting journey, what are just a couple of steps that they could take to move into that direction, to not regret their parenting style and their need for a redo? What could they do to shore some of those things up?
Yes. And I would say it is never too late. We may just need to be honest and go to our kids and say, hey, I feel like we should have done some things a little bit differently. And I just want to apologize that we haven't been intentional about XYZ, whatever it is. But I would say absolutely, if you're not in the habit of saying, I'm sorry, start there. And then intentional connection. And I would also say play. Somewhere between the toddler years and the teenage years, I think we forget that our older kids still need just the fun. Playing. I mean, for me, I was out throwing a football with my boys all the time. Now they come home, we go play pool or cards or something. But just so much of our transactions with our kids is, have you done your homework? Did you take your trash out?
Yep.
We need conversation where we're seeking to draw them out and just delight in them.
That's really good. This has been great. Thanks for being with us. I mean, what a great read, Parenting Ahead. Preparing now for the teen years. I wish I would have had this. You should have written this like 15 years ago.
I didn't know it then.
Perfect timing. But, it's kind of one of those do-over things. The kids are in the 20s for us and 20s and 30s for you, John. But as veteran parents, we look back and would love to say to younger parents particularly, here are the things to pay attention to so you don't have those regrets. And I would encourage you to get a copy of the book. Make it fun. Get a hold of us, and for a gift of any amount, be part of the ministry. Help other parents as we're doing this, but make a gift of any amount, $10, $5. If you can't afford it, let us know. We'll get the book into your hands. But if you can do that, we'll send you a copy to say thanks for being part of the ministry. And together we're touching other lives and helping build the kingdom.
Yeah, contact us today. Make a donation as you can. Request that book. And I'll encourage you to sign up for our Age and Stage e-newsletter, which is a terrific way for you to get kind of a steady dose of age-specific content all around your child's particular season of life. So you can find all those resources. We've got links for you in the program description, or call 800, the letter A, and the word family. And on behalf of the entire team, thanks for joining us today for Focus on the Family with Jim Daly. I'm John Fuller, inviting you back as we once again help you and your family thrive in Christ.